Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to welcome you here today for the concluding seminar of our series this academic year. Today we have a talk by Professor Luciano Floridi entitled, "What is the Impact of AI on Democracy?" For those of you who don't already know me, my name is Avery Slater. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of English at the University of Toronto and faculty fellow at the Schwartz Reisman Institute for Technology and Society. Before we begin today's session, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, Toronto has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. While some of us may be joining here on our Zoom call from different places, we invite you to reflect on the history and relations of the land that you are on. So a few logistics as we begin. Just to notify everyone, this session is being recorded. Our speaker, Professor Floridi, will speak for about 45 or 50 minutes, followed by a question and answer period. And during the Q&A, we do encourage all participants to use the raise hand function in the Zoom meeting controls to ask a question. When it's your turn to speak, one of our team will unmute you. And you can also write questions for Professor Floridi in the chat, which everyone will be able to see, and Professor Floridi can take those questions too, if he's so inclined. So, okay, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Professor Floridi. Luciano Floridi is founding director of the Digital Ethics Center and professor in the Cognitive Science program at Yale University. He's also a professor of the sociology of culture and communication at the University of Bologna and the editor-in-chief of the journal Philosophy and Technology. Before joining Yale, Professor Floridi was professor of philosophy and ethics of information at the University of Oxford's Internet Institute. He has published more than 300 works on the philosophy of information, digital ethics, the ethics of AI, and the philosophy of technology. His most recent books are The Ethics of Artificial Intelligence, Principles, Challenges, and Opportunities, 2023, and The Green and the Blue, Naive Ideas to Improve Politics in the Digital Age, also from this year. His works have, from 2023. What year are we in? His works have been translated into languages. He's deeply engaged with policy initiatives on the socio-ethical implications of digital technologies and applications, and he collaborates closely on these topics with governments and companies worldwide. In 2022, the president of the Italian Republic, Sergio Mattarella, bestowed upon him Italy's most prestigious honor, Knight of the Grand Cross of the Order of Merit. That was in recognition of his foundational work in philosophy. I couldn't agree more. It's a great honor to welcome you here to the Schwartz Reisman community today, Professor Floridi, and without ado, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you really so much. The risk of disappointing, as we were saying during the preparation of this talk online, is very high. The older you get, the higher the bar, the easier to fail. So I hope that you will understand me correctly when I say that the ideas that I'm going to present today with you are very much work in progress. I will tell you a little bit more where they come from, but they belong to my attempt to understand better, at least on my side, what sort of difference digital technology and this digital age or revolution is making in the most profound sense to our lives. There was a time when we thought that this was just a matter of one more channel of communication. And I was not convinced at the time. I was much younger, but it already looked like something way more profound and significant. And I suppose, through the decades, we have seen this having a deeper and more challenging impact on our lives, on our societies, on anything from A to Z. So the topic for today is politics. Just another little premise before I show you some slides and we do some real work. I grew up thinking, like any philosopher, that the real core of philosophy, what you do if you are a true philosopher, is engaging with the queens of the discipline, the nature of reality, metaphysics, ontology, the nature of knowledge, epistemology, philosophy of science, the nature of meaning, philosophy of language, or mental life, philosophy of mind. And then there's all the other disciplines around us. Well, there's a bit of course, aesthetics. Some people are interested in the philosophy of social sciences. There's political philosophy, philosophy of law, philosophy of economics. But these are not the real thing. There's, of course, ethics, fundamental. But if you are a big player in the field, logic, metaphysics, epistemology, philosophy of science, these are the robust things in which we have to invest. The way I'm telling you the story, you can tell that I've changed my mind. I changed my mind profoundly, individually. And I don't care anymore if I'm on the wrong side of the discipline. But I don't think that that is exactly what we should be learning and studying. And then, therefore, you will see why the interest in more political philosophy, ethics, the impact of what we do on this planet. And so I think that I come to conclude that my young self misunderstood the importance of the starting point, with which is the nature of reality, the nature of knowledge, logic, and so on, with the value of where you're going and where you want to go and get, which is what difference does it make to our lives? And therefore, yes, politics, society, ethics, values, not because those are the things that are the foundation of our philosophical analysis, they are not, but because they are what justify all that work. So it's a bit like confusing the fact that you're starting from home with the reason why you're traveling in the first place to go somewhere. So part of the work that we're going to do today is a little bit more of the analytic kind. And of course, I will deal with some concepts and some analysis. But I want to make clear that I believe that practical, as in the Kantian sense of practical, so value-oriented philosophy is what justifies philosophy in general. And anything else we do it because of that. It's a very Greek word, perspective, if you like, the kind of perspective for which a Socrates can die, and Plato and Aristotle can actually create new institutions, or travel all the way to Sicily and back. Anyway, enough of this long premise, otherwise my 45 minutes will go into all this little chat. We have some work to do. The title, and I think we can now show the slides either on my side or yours.
I think you have to share.
So I can do that, yes.
I think so, yes.
Perfect. And now you should be seeing the slides instead of me. Perfect. So the title already tells you where we're going with this analysis. What's the impact of AI on democracy? And anyone listening, there will be some trivial points. I want to go through the trivial points because they're important, but I also want to make sure that we don't get distracted by the superficial points. Together, we have some slides to maneuver. So let's see the map of the talk. I'll give you a quick introduction so we know where we start from. And then I will spend some time telling you a little bit more about, and trust me, I will do this in the least painful way, what I mean by AI, what I mean by power and so forth, so that you know where I'm coming from. It's not a matter of convincing you that I'm right, but it's a matter of being clear in case we disagree what we disagree about. I call them kernel theories because they are really a couple of slides, so nothing more than explaining what sort of background I like to share with you. Then the real sort of discussion, which is what is the direct impact of AI? I said I will cover a few trivial points there. They're important, but I don't think they're the most important. And then the deep impact, but also the deep opportunity we have in using this new technology for a better world, just to put it in a sort of teenager way. All I'm talking about comes, actually is based on these two books. COVID made them come out at the same time. I don't know what to write two books in a year, but they had different starting points and so on. And they just ended up coming out from two different publishers at the same time. This is no advertisement. Please do not buy them. Just to let you know where some of the ideas I'm sharing with you have their roots. So some warming up, and to get into the topic, democracy is doing very badly. We all know that. Sometimes it's good to be reminded how badly we're doing. Remember when we were talking about the end of history? It was a bad idea in a bad book at the time. It's even a worse idea in a worse book now. There was no such thing, and we lower our guards. We thought that with the end of the wall in Berlin, the end of the Soviet Empire, the end of apartheid in South Africa, the White House with a decent president, and so on, job done. And this is the outcome. This is 2023, and we can see that the deep blue countries, this was before, and is an objective map. So not just because we're talking to Canadians, there's very, very little democracy around. Certainly in the two countries I belong to, in Italy and United States, likely I also have a British passport, so I can get away with that. But this means that there is a relation between how badly we're doing democratically speaking and technology. Not really, or I mean, correlation of some kind. I'll tell you more about this, but this is another map, and I'll show you a third. This is the Global AI Index. It's sufficiently updated, but obviously, particularly in this case, updated means not much when it comes to AI. Once again, you can see the power players, the usual China and the US, but also traditional champions. And again, we have Canada, France, Germany, UK, plus also participants. Now, some people have discussed the risk that these two maps may actually come together. In this third map, is the third map that shows where people are going to vote for some kind of local, federal, EU level, so union level powers. It's the biggest event ever in terms of voting on this planet we have ever seen. 2024 is election day, election year. Now, the hypothesis is that, of course, AI might actually hijack the poor democracy in map 1 through the power of technology shown in map 2 to make a mess of map 3. Now, this is a serious concern. And actually, I'm happy to share with you news that we just agreed with Wikipedia Foundation to develop an analysis through their data of how this information is developing in the United States for the current election of the presidential election. So we will have potentially, hopefully by the end of the summer, before the end of the elections, a much better view of the impact of AI on all this, at least as far as Wikimedia are concerned, and the US elections. But certainly there are concerns. The concern, and I put it here, we might come back to this, is the extraordinary ability, the power of these technologies in the wrong hands, of course, to hijack, transform views, inclinations, beliefs, fears, hopes of millions of people. Is a hyper form of persuasion. So I like to call it, if you want a fancy word, high persuasion provided by AI, which can know our taste, inclinations, desires, and manipulate us, again, in the wrong hands, way more easily than the old newspapers or even mass media like TV. Now, all this requires the impact of AI on politics, a bit of clarification. And here are the three Kernel theories: power, AI, and democracy. And for the non-computer scientists here, the kernel is the program at the core of your computer's system. So it really is the little thing that makes and controls what's going on your laptop. So I call them kernel, just as mean tiny little, just a couple of words, so to speak, on these three concepts, so that we can look at the impact of AI, the superficial one, and the deep one. So first of all, kernel of theory of power. Now, the three kinds of power in general. Anyone may notice some Carl Schmitt influence here, if you know that particular corner of our academic world. They come from our understanding of the superpower being God. If you are omnipotent, you can create, annihilate something. Say you can make something pop up out of thin air, say a stone. You can transform that into something else, manufacturing. You can transform that into a bird, and then you can control that bird, send the bird left rather than right. So poietic power, manufacturing power, cybernetic power. Cybernetic there being the Greek word. Political scientists will not need to be reminded, but for the computer scientists now, cybernetic comes from Plato, is the analogy that Plato provides when he needs to talk about politics and who governs the ship. The Kubernetes, the pilot of the ship, is the one who knows the sea, the winds, the stars, etc., etc. So cybernetic coming from there means control, and it means control over reality. And it's that cybernetic power that we focus on when we want to understand socio-political power. That control means the ability to control or influence people's behavior. Of course, you do that creating or transforming things or information about things. Now, things could be goods, services, and information about things could be laws or news. But still, remember, of the three powers is the kybernetic or cybernetic that is behind. Now, why is this important to have this bit of an orientation? Well, because in the past, power was exercised in terms of control over things. Marx, if you remember, the control on the means of production and the industrialist world. Then he moved into control about information about things. And today we've moved even further. So in developed societies, which are awash with cheap goods and free information, what has happened is that power is exercised about which questions can be asked and what answers can be received. I need to stay here for a moment because it may seem a little bit obscure. So imagine good old kind of barons, I know, the Rockefeller of the world, the Carnegie and Mellon. You control stuff and you can tell other powers what to do. Then you move forward and Washington Post, Watergate, etc. The real power is not who owns what, but what information can be provided about the what, etc. And so we have a new power, power information together with the others. Today, the real powerful people don't produce stuff and don't produce information. They produce means through which we produce information about stuff. I mean, Amazon is a typical case, but so would be any sort of AI tool, Microsoft, the Meta or Facebook or Google of the world. Take Google. I mean, it doesn't produce anything, but it makes possible to produce information about stuff. Now, this way of understanding the sort of power behind power means that in the same sort of liberal societies, and I put that in red and I explained it quickly, the morphology of power as control is the morphology of uncertainty. Now, that may sound like a fancy philosophical way of being confused, but it isn't. Think for a moment about what a piece of information is. It's a question plus an answer. What is the capital of France? Paris. Now, if you control the question, you also control which answers can be provided, when, how, to what degree, etc. Now, recently, a lot of banning has happened because, of course, Easter, and there is a lot of naked bodies. I mean, Jesus on the cross. Well, Meta thought that was a bit too much of nudity. That kind of world, so you can control exactly what information is shared. And therefore, the morphology of power is no longer the morphology of who controls stuff, who controls information about stuff, but who controls how information about stuff gets generated. In other words, who controls questions. So questions like transparency, privacy, right to be forgotten, freedom of speech, ownership, etc., they become questions where you really wonder who can ask legitimately, powerfully, what questions, and who needs or is expected to provide the answers. Now, this sounds a lot like a book you have read. Those who control the questions shape the answers, and those who shape the answers control reality. Remember Present, Future, and Past, 1984? Well, it's a bit of that sign. So that is the template. Now, in that world, so we have a bit of sense of power now and where I'm coming from. A word about AI. So the second Kernel theory. We know that we have new AI, and once again, I'm so sorry. I mean, this I should be giving this talk in a different context, but as you know, neural networks is a Canadian sort of glory. Sorry, this is not captatio benevolentia, but it's just a fact. We have had neural networks and that sort of AI for a long time. I remember a chapter in a book I wrote in 1999 when I was teaching logic, mathematical logic, and a bit of computer science, etc., talking about these neural networks. We didn't have the data, we didn't have the power, and we didn't have the money to develop them into what they are today. And of course, now we have much more. We have things like called attention, quote unquote, and transformers, quote unquote, etc. But essentially, we move from logic to statistics, and we abandon or semi-abandon the view that AI works in terms of deduction in order to embrace association. Lots and lots of data on one side now will be correlated to information on the other. If you can show to a machine 10,000 pictures of a cat, it will learn how to recognize cat, no matter what cat in the future. Now this, and much more can be said about this, is actually interpretable in two ways, either as a marriage between a form of whatever kind of intelligence you want to compare it to, biologically speaking, and an engineering artifact. You can start thinking, look, at some point, biology and engineering will come together and will generate this amazing AI. We are ready for the super intelligence. Now, that is not only science fiction, is a bad science fiction. Is not happening, is not going to happen, and it will never happen as far as we know in terms of science instead of science fiction. Now, you don't have to believe me. I'm happy to come back in a few years to see where we are with this AI as super intelligence, now the sort of singularity and so on. What I would like to argue, but you don't have to believe me and you don't have to agree with me, you just have to know where I'm coming from, is that instead of being a marriage between biology and engineering, it's actually a divorce between agency and intelligence. I'll show you a couple of videos in a moment to illustrate this more clearly, but essentially the point is quite simple. For the first time in human history, we have something in the world that can do something, solve problems, take care of tasks, successfully, in view of a goal, able to learn from its output at zero intelligence. Like my phone that plays chess better than anyone else I've ever met. It doesn't have any intelligence, and yet it plays chess better than anyone else. It has a goal, wants to win, can learn, etc., etc. Now, this extraordinary as the singularity or the appearance of a superintelligence, but of a different kind, extraordinary phenomenon of separation of agency and intelligence has generated a lot of problems. But let me show you what I mean by this separation. Normally, if you detach agency, ability to take care of a task successfully, learning while you're doing it, in view of a goal, from any need to be intelligent in doing so, the recipe is a total disaster. Don't do that while driving or parking or buying a ticket online. So how come that this is working now? Well, first of all, we have a lot of data, as I told you. Then we have a lot of computational power. Then we have amazing statistics, all the new AI. We have also moved ourselves, living in a world where digital ontology is the local ontology. In other words, the nature of the environment in which we live is digital. So the real natives are the robots, so to speak, the bots, not us. We scuba dive in that field, in their world. They are the locals. But above all, we are transforming the world so that it actually fits the abilities of the technology that we are developing. This is how you collect strawberries these days. You don't have someone like me or an android built like me that goes around picking strawberries. You put strawberries in a straightforward line so that the agency in question is successful. You transform the world around the AI that can do the job. And it's a good thing. But we need to be careful, because if we transform the whole world into a world like this is not for us. This is for the machines. And they work amazingly well. I mean, don't open a new startup with strawberries or apples or anything, thinking that you can actually hire people to do that. The cost will be unsustainable. Let me show you a different example. This is also same idea. It's a warehouse, and the warehouse is built around the robots. Then no humans here, unless you start looking at the end of this video, and there is the single human protected in that little space so that all the other robots can work. Now, of course, I'm showing you robots, which is much easier, visually speaking. I cannot show you software in a soup of digital data, but it's the same idea. When we constantly feed ChatGPT with our own data, in and out and to and fro, who is adapting to whom? If you have seen the amount of delve into recently discovered, more on this if you haven't, but it's hilarious. It's actually changing the way we speak English because we are adapting to the machines. So ChatGPT does to language, for example, what a calculator does to maths. There is no database, there is no intelligence, consciousness, understanding, semantics, relevance, feelings, goals, fears, doesn't worry about the pension. It's a piece of software. So everybody relax on that front. However, in order to work, we need to be in a digital context. Final example, in case you're not yet convinced, if you have a driverless car, or you have a car like mine, who is kind of level 2, 3-ish, you know that you have to pay attention all the time. Why? Because it's a node in a network. When a network goes down, that is a piece of junk. It doesn't work. So unless the whole environment is meant to ensure that that driverless car is successful, that driverless car will not have a chance. That's why we do not have androids driving instead of us, but we are rethinking the car as a node in a network. That's what I mean by having AI as a divorce between agency and intelligence. Let me just move forward because I know that time is short. So this is the last bit of hard work, and then the rest is running downhill, so to speak. Democracy. So I gave you 2 points: power as control, and today especially control of how to generate information, and AI as a divorce between intelligence and agency. Now, when it comes to representative democracy, I also would like to introduce something that, unfortunately, I don't do this on purpose, but seems to be a little bit unorthodox. So, warning, unorthodox points coming. If you look at representative democracy, people normally have this debate. They will tell you that a democracy is a democracy because of the rules followed, or the values pursued. There's a debate between the two, and I think the proceduralism is kind of winning the debate. Substantialism is a little bit less popular these days, but you can even embrace the two. But I'd like to convince you that there's something more fundamental which will enable us to understand where AI can make a real difference. You won't find this around, and I hope it's not totally silly, but before debating rules and values, we need to debate the condition that makes possible to have a democracy at all, which is the structure of power. Let's call that structuralism. In the following sense, consider the ownership of power, who has political power, as sovereignty, to have a word. So the people, those few democracies we saw in one of the maps, they have the power. And then consider the exercise of power as governance. I mean, these are keywords, but use whatever other words you like, just to have a shortcut. Now, when it comes to the separation between power owned by someone and power exercised by someone, the previous two views, the procedural and the substantialist, they think there is a compromise. Unfortunately, I'll show you in a moment more precisely, we don't live in Athens. We cannot exercise power directly. We have to delegate. So representative democracy is a compromise. Not the case. It's not a bug, it's a feature. It is the solution. The separation between who has the power and who exercise that power, it's a good feature of any democracy. In fact, I would argue that there is no democracy when this separation is not in place. Where this all went wrong a long time ago. Maybe it's not just Stuart Mill, but certainly he's one of the killers here. This beautiful view that the real state, social state, is one in which the whole people participate. Nothing less can be ultimately desirable. A mission of all to share the sovereign power of the state, and the compromise. Unfortunately, since all cannot, in a community exceeding a single small town, participate personally on any then we have to give up the ideal type of perfect government. And we have to compromise for the representative. If we could, we would, but we cannot, therefore. Now, that is I think is one of the greatest white lies in political science ever. I don't know if John Stuart Mill knew it, and maybe he didn't. But this sounds to me like, can you come to the party of Uncle John? And you say, oh, yes, absolutely, if only I could, but unfortunately, Mom is not feeling well. And then you get a second call that says, Mom is feeling fine. Now you have to come to Uncle John's party, because it was a white lie. Now that we have digital technologies that enable that digital village to appear, you have all the populists in the world, in Italy, in the UK, in this country from which I'm telling you, oh, I want to speak directly to the people. I'm going to tweet this, and you guys are going to go to the Capitol Hill and make a damn mess. Well, unfortunately, that is exactly the model we want to avoid. Why? Because that separation was a good plan. Let me just stay on this for one more minute or so. Imagine a world in which those who exercise the power, they also own it, and those who own it exercise it. Well, that is the recipe for any sort of non-democratic government in the world. And honestly, that's, for example, is China, just to be frank, or any other country where you wouldn't like to migrate tomorrow if you had plenty of choice. Why? Well, because exactly the ownership of power means that the people have the exercise and the ownership of their power, will not give it up. So I'm not even sure that democracy, is the least worst of all possible options. Churchill's died. No, it's actually a good idea to separate these two, the ownership and the exercise, and then reunite it through representative governments, which means consensus and government. Now, that is the problem that I hope AI can actually solve, but more on this because I'm anticipating. So, power as control, AI as agency, democracy as a separation between different powers. That is the recipe. That is a blueprint. It's not a compromise. It's the fundamental project for a good democracy. What's the impact of all this? Here is the easy part. So if you read any newspaper and they've been worried about 2024, they will tell you that there is this hijacking risk. AI will be used. Well, by the way, since the beginning of this chat talk, I've been talking about AI, but what we really mean is machine learning most of the time. I know I spoke about robotics too, but mostly is the new machine learning cut. So we'll tell you, AI machine learning will make a mess. Foundational AI or generative AI, new generation of, there are different terminology, but essentially your ChatGPT onwards will generate some of these problems. Now, read in terms of what I told you before, remember the separation between ownership and exercise of power is a good thing. Well, what happens if there is no separation? Autocracy or sovereigntism, which is a Italian-French word to mean people who believe that the power of the state must be exercised like an individual against all the other individuals playing on the big board of international relations. It's not nationalism, but no, a distant, nastier cousin of nationalism. Now, suppose we have the wrong kind of separation between who owns the power and who exercises the powers. Well, that's populism and cronyism. The misalignment is stinky. Sometimes you have the wrong allocation. You have a crisis of sovereignty or loss of sovereignty. Not for today, but this is another chapter in the discussion of digital revolution and transformation in politics. As you know, the digital sovereignty debate is ongoing, and it's not a matter of regaining power and control of things like education, healthcare, security, defense on the side of the state, but gaining for the first time because the state doesn't have that kind of sovereign power at the moment. So this is the AI bad impact, and you find this in the newspapers all over the place. Is the way in which we think that AI is exacerbating the crisis of democracy. Once you know that Twitter, now X, is owned by Elon Musk, and you start thinking, oh my goodness, certainly that big microphone, megaphone is going to make a mess of our democracy. Well, that's exactly what we mean here. The sort of alliance that you would like not to see in the world. It can also have, again, we're talking about the more sort of superficial level, good impact in terms of, remember, separating ownership and exercise, and therefore accountability. And those who own the power can get it back. They don't like who governs, they can replace who governs after a certain while, etc. And who governs is accountable. It's not my power, despite what some candidates for the current presidency in the United States believe. So good separation means democracy and no democratic deficit. No accountability, transparency, and so on. When you have a good kind of separation, not just the mechanism, then you have pluralism. You have democracy not as the success of the majority, but as the protection of the minority, as the ability to listen to the voices that do not speak. That is a good separation of these powers. And of course, you can also allocate that power in the proper way, rightly. There's no loss of sovereignty, there's digital sovereignty. So all the nice things that we have in those few blue countries multiplied, extended, exactly the kind of world that you want to live in. Okay, so in this case, AI can mitigate the crisis of democracy. So these two pictures, the more orangey and nasty and the more bluish, is what we find at the moment discussed. Can AI go a little bit deeper? Can it be part of a deeper solution? I think so, and inevitably I'm here for obvious reasons. I'm quite mildly optimistic about the technology in question. I'm much more pessimistic about our ability to use the technology the right way. but I think it can solve the crisis of democracy that we are looking at. This is the deeper difficulty that I want to discuss, and I hope to do that in the next 10-ish minutes, looking at every slide, thinking that I hope I have that amount of time. So remember what I said? Well, it was the recipe since day one. It was a white lie to think that a representative democracy was the compromise. It is not. It is the feature to begin with. Unfortunately, the more you separate ownership of power and exercise of power, and the more you fragment power, the more democracy is inefficient. In other words, the less democracy can work. What I'm arguing here, and I'll argue for another minute or so, is that both countries which we have taken as the representative of liberal democracies, great democracies, meaning Britain and the US, are now in such a poor state and affected by populism, not accidentally. It is not just a matter of how did it go so wrong. It was part of the development of chapter 1 in the history of liberal democracy and the sort of representative democracy. If democracy starts as initially an attempt to make sure that there's a separation between ownership and exercise of power, between the three powers, between parties and lobbyists, and so on. So it is all a matter of making sure that essentially we get to a stalemate, a place where we cannot move anymore because there are counterparts, and for every A there is a non-A that can probably argue the opposite, etc. Well, inevitably you get to the American Senate, which is dysfunctional. And rightly so, if I may put the point a bit sort of paradoxically. That is exactly the first half of the plan. Democracy as a separation of power, powers sort of balance each other, and nothing happens. Problems don't get solved. You don't go anywhere. So in the past, this is what we have implemented in the first sort of half of the project, 20th century. We have been unifying powers through pressing emergencies, not by will, but by necessity. The horrible example there is a reminder that we did not prevent Auschwitz, we liberated Auschwitz. That is a completely different story. It was because we had to go into a war with Nazi Germany and fascist Italy and so on, that in the end, something decent came out. Democracy became a meta project. It was not a project about what we do together, but is a protection of every individual project, which is a great thing. Is one leg on a two-leg organism, though. Protection of individual rights, protection of individual projects, absolutely. But what do we do together was not longer part of the business, because we saw the first half of the 20th century when together meant the sort of horrible stories in Germany, in Russia, in Spain, in Greece, in Italy, and on and on and on, in China. And competition has been, and even today, if you ask anybody, the mechanism for coordination, which is great, but very limited, is sometimes necessary, but is insufficient. A lot of the things we need to do require more than just competition. So what do we have today is a lack of the second half. To oversimplify, you separate first, great. And now you have to glue together. And the gluing together, building consensus, having a shared political view as a community, which protects the individuals, but also has a project as a community, well, that is not yet written. It's a bit like asking Mary and John, they are married, and what plans they have. And they say, well, John has his own project for life, and Mary has a project for life. And you ask them, oh, as a family, do you have any project? Oh, of course not. Our family is there to protect John's project and Mary's project. Well, that's not a family. That's just two people living together, sharing a bed or maybe a kitchen. So there has to be more. And I want to stress this because it's crucial. It's not alternative to, it's not instead of, it's the other leg of the run. You need both legs. You need the protection of the individual and the protection of the community. you need to have individual projects and shared project as a group, a society, possibly a global community of goodwills. So we don't have unification through distant emergencies because climate change, migration, local wars, you can always postpone. Politics hardly ever acts on something that the next politician has to pay for. You have individualist democracies that are insufficient because they cannot cope with global distant challenges. If you need to push that car, and I've given this example more than once, forgive me, competition between the five of us will not go anywhere. Now, I go there, I push, and I come back home and I sleep soundly because I've done my duty. Well, the car hasn't moved at all. This is the same as taking a shorter shower or not eating meat or taking a bus to go to work. That is good in itself, but useless. And if anyone thinks that is good because it's useful, is deluded. Is really not making any difference in the world. Unless, of course, we all do that. But then is a different story. Is the universalization of the individual habit. You do it because you want to look at yourself in the mirror in the morning and you turn off the light at the right time, etc., etc. So it's more of a Kantian, for the philosophers among us, view than a utilitarianist view. And of course, competition, political and economic, is insufficient for any collaborative and cooperative levels of coordination. If we just compete among ourselves, it's like essentially coordinating like on a motorway. I go my way, you go your way. We don't bump into each other. Perfectly fine. Total freedom. Great world. And we never get organized. Now, the global problems that we have now require coordination. And that's the coordination complexity paradox that we live now. The richer we get, the less individuals within those rich societies feel the need to coordinate their efforts. Because after all, I don't even know who my neighbor is. As long as we don't shoot at each other, at least in countries where you cannot buy a Kalashnikov with a check, as I discovered. Yet the more problems are coordination complex, because their society is affluent for a reason, has generated problems that are global, like global warming. And so the more individuals should actually coordinate their efforts. But of course, they live in a society they're not putting pressure. So sufficiently good locally doesn't raise to good enough globally. So the ultimate risk of AI for democracy is that it makes this planet stalemate permanent, irreversible. To put it more philosophically, it fails to overcome modernity. And that's what we have today. Filter bubbles, fake news, polarizations, partisanship, zero-sum games. All these are ways in which AI can exacerbate and not resolve the separation between ownership and exercise of power. This is the ultimate risk, but is also the ultimate benefit, because we could use AI and many other technologies and many other solutions. Today's AI, because that's the topic for today. But of course, this is not the ultimate panacea, but it's part of the solution. We could use it to make sure that democracy writes the second half of the story, which is consensus. So yes, separate sovereignty from governance, and absolutely work on the second half of rebuilding consensus around issues that require a community and a communal social effort. So that is a way of overcoming modernity and facilitate the second half of the democratic project. We're almost there. This means more pluralism, multiculturalism in communication, consensus and trust in society and culture, bipartisanship in politics, collaborative win-win games as a strategy. And by the way, for the people who know much more than I do about game theory, you know that we always study the first 2/3 of the textbook, and the last third, which is on collaborative games, you never get there normally. That is not what the course tends to cover. So almost there. How we can do this? So, okay, thank you, but how that could look like? Well, we could reintroduce a bit of democracy by stealth. For example, lower age of voters, different voting systems. Anyone who has done any work on democracy knows there are tens of ways of organizing a voting system. Some, they're actually more favorable to democracy. Some others, they put Trump in the White House. Which one would you like? Optimize more efficiency, more efficacy of policies. We can experiment more. We can look more. We can identify new solutions. I can tell you more about this in terms of the unknowns, etc. But chess is a good example. Anyone who has followed the development of chess recently knows that we are exploring corners of chess that had never been explored before, because chess had been played by humans who never could see that a very bad move now could pay back 15 moves later. That was too far. And now we're exploring it. So AI could actually help us to explore policies that don't look so good at the moment, but actually are the right policies. We can leverage cooperative game theory way more better, simulate new solutions, twin cities, for example, and so on. We can start bottom up urban solutions. There's something called street level bureaucracy, for example. We're doing some work here, and the kind of solutions that you can start at the street level all the way up. We can use great cities and the Association International among great cities as a way of implementing good policies. And we can support scale up. So final comments. The future of democracy is coordination, collaboration, and cooperation, these 3 C's. You coordinate when everybody does whatever they want, but we don't bump into each other. We collaborate when we divide tasks into blocks. I bring the wine, you bring the pizza. What we cooperate when we go and buy all the ingredients together and we cook together and we eat together. So there are different levels at which we can do things together. The 3 C's are fundamental. We're not going to have a 22nd century if we don't implement them. We know that. Today, we all know that AI is a lot part of the problem. You just have to read the newspapers, but it can be part of the solution. What is missing is politics and a goodwill. And on that, I have less than a pinch of optimism. But let's see whether I can change my mind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm seeing rounds of applause on video and on reactions. So thanks. We're going to move into our question and answers part of the session today. We do have some questions pre-invited, and anyone else who would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. I'll ask the first question just as people come in to ask questions. So Professor Floridi, thank you so much for such a thought-provoking and wide-ranging and urgent talk. You know, the quote that you brought in from your own writing, you gave in a comparison. You said Auschwitz was liberated, not prevented. I found that very haunting. It reminded me of scholars who work on the concentration camp system, thinking about how other infrastructures of technology allowed camps like Auschwitz to come into being. For example, Raoul Hilberg's work on railways. And it made me think about the parallels with infrastructure that's bringing machine learning and AI into people's lives, not to draw a kind of comparison with concentration camps, but I think your point in bringing that out was to think carefully about how the ethics of technology that are already lying around have to be rethought in a kind of new moment of technology, and that we have to take the political challenge of AI seriously, and at that level of seriousness. And you know, one thing I've been trying to figure out is the kind of business model of bringing in AI through already existing free services, free platforms, where the platform that people are already using, and you had an example of, say, Facebook and the Capitol riots, platforms that people are already using are bringing AI in, and that AI kind of feature is collecting data, might be used to create different versions of reality on those platforms. So I'm wondering, with this phrase that you've given us, morphology of power, if you could say something about the morphology of power that you see developing around pre-existing infrastructures of sort of platform capitalism and different technologies that are already in people's lives and that are being kind of updated with a radically different kind of technology. Thanks.
Thank you. That is a wonderful question. Difficult to answer. Of course, we want to maintain perspectives, obviously, and my example of Auschwitz was and it remains staggering. I think part of the problem, if we look at the infrastructure and how we get to the wrong side of history, and let's forget about Auschwitz, but even small, much smaller, but many wrong sides, is unfortunately quietly, silently, gently. It's not always the case. I mean, I would say that most of the times, let me put it in a sort of stark terms, evil doesn't come all of a sudden. It doesn't show up, boom, like that. Like Mephistopheles in Faust studio. It sneaks in. It corrodes. It modifies. It changes your mind. Basically, we're boiled to death in this soup that we didn't quite realize it was getting warmer and warmer by the day. And without being too catastrophic, I mean, of course, you got the Google, the Amazon, the Microsoft, the open, so to speak, AI of the world. I mean, it's a different story. But when it comes to drawing an analogy with the morphology of power, I think that what we have decided is okay, which is quite extraordinary, is to run this immense social test without even thinking, is it going to be okay? Is it risky? Is it going to generate, for example, a trauma in a whole generation? Will it provoke a change in economics? Will it shift values? Let me know, since many of us are academics here, we introduce this language generating, content generating tools without even thinking for a moment before, like how education will be completely turned upside down. In a world which I remember as a tutor back in Oxford, every student had to write many essays a week. Obviously, you introduce a machine that can check and write a decent essay on Descartes, and that's okay. You get a decent sort of mark for it. So I think that the morphology of power today is still about asking, not only controlling questions, but asking questions without even thinking, what damage do you do in asking that particular question? And this is irresponsible. I find the companies in question, I understand competition, and I understand that they need to be first, and they need to shout more than others, and they need to hype their products more than others. And if you look at the statistics, for example, we find that a good percentage, I think the majority of American citizens are worried about AI. They probably don't know what they're talking about. I mean, given the majority of citizens, they probably have no idea. But because Robocop or Terminator was coming, according to LinkedIn, then now they are concerned, quite rightly. So there is a form of excessive faith in our ability to be critical and to be informed in our decisions that turns into an abuse of the kind of questions we can ask and the kind of experiments we can run. It's a bit like thinking, and I close here, that we are still in this sort of world of Homo economicus, that well-informed, rational, clear sense of the priors and the Bayesian analogies will make decisions, and then you bombard, in fact, fragile human beings with misinformation, disinformation, lack of information, wrong kind of information, cheap information, advertisement, and all the rest. And all of a sudden you find, oh, they're cracking under the pressure. How surprising. We knew it. It was obvious. So let me close here. When OpenAI decided to release to anyone, open ChatGPT 3.5 to anyone who wanted to go online and play with it, I thought that was irresponsible. They could have been a little bit more careful. And I'm not saying, no, don't do it. Of course, technology, etc. And honestly, any forum in this university of ours that needs that kind of boilerplate, I'm the first to use it. We're on record. No, never. I've never filled a forum using ChatGPT. But honestly, we could have been more careful, and we keep doing that. The last example will be this voice that we know is coming. In a few minutes, you can clone the voice of anyone. Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Thank you. So next we have an invited question from Hani Dama. Hani, do you want to unmute? Great. Hi.
Hi. Okay, great. Thank you. And I'm going to ask a question I've been struggling with for some time. There seems to be a growing tension between direct democracy and expertise. And this, I mean, you can see many variations of that, but one of the ways this has manifested is a pushback against expertise in unelected parts of the government, and against technocracy, for example, in competition policy, which is my field. But another way you could interpret it is also that any kind of expertise, anytime that we experts, academics, make statements about how society should be governed, then we're behaving like unelected philosopher kings. I'd be curious to know how you would resolve that tension. Thank you.
I'd love to know that too. So the expertise debate, I think we get on the wrong foot when we start talking about, oh, this complex matters, experts should govern those matters. No, that's not the way of putting it. The way of putting it is not, for the logician, it's not a two-way inference. Those who govern should know what they're talking and doing, but we don't want to have those who know and are the experts to govern. That's the other way around. So it's not that we want to have people who are naive, either with no expertise, no idea, to be in the most powerful corners of the world to make decisions about complex matters. No, we want them to be well informed. Now, well informed might be, for example, to consult with people who know, not least because their expertise is a special kind. I mean, politics is a form of expertise. I mean, and that's the second point of my answer. This story, again, that the politician is someone who doesn't have expertise, but talk to the expert, is a bit of a funny story. Now, the analogy that I have in mind here is with your, what we call in England, GP, the general practitioner, your family doctor. Well, in many countries, Italy included, and the UK, becoming a family doctor is becoming a form of expertise, because you have to be a generalist, but you have to be an expert as a generalist, so that when I have something very special, a unique, you can send me in the right direction. You can consult and understand. You can be the interface between me and, say, the great cardiologist and so on. Now, that is the great politician, someone who has the expertise as a generalist to talk to experts like you or anyone else in this, and interface that with people who have no idea, who don't care to have any idea. So the 2 points. Those in power should have some expertise, not the other way around. Not the experts should govern, but those who govern should be experts. And expert of what? As generalist. And here, I refer back to the analogy that Plato introduced, but we have been using it ever since. The state as a boat ship that needs to be governed, etc. He says, well, the pilot needs to know the winds and needs to know the stars, but above all, he needs to know where you want to go. He needs to have a plan. And that, to me, is the highest level of expertise that a good politician has: a vision, a project, a sense of all the things that need to be done, and the amount of knowledge and expertise there will be immense. No one could possibly, no form of government can possibly control that. It needs all the think tanks and the special committee and so on. But having a vision of where all that energy, abilities can lead us, well, that is the highest level of expertise, the one that Cicero was talking about. The highest call of an individual is political, because it's where the questions are so open that you need to have a trade-off and a counterbalance and understand what is pro and what is contra, and what is the right compromise, and what kind of compromise will cost what, etc. That is unique and it's very human. So I think that this debate about the expertise is hijacked a little bit by technocrat who think that technology or science or knowledge will solve the problem. Just tell me how to, say, run the equation. They don't understand the fundamental issue, which is we're dealing with open problems. And that's the last comment. An open problem is a problem that takes into account the empirical facts and all the reasoning, all the maths, all the stats that you have on the other, but is open because you and I can have all the information in the world. We can be 100% rational and willing to exchange ideas, open-minded, and still disagree on what the right solution is. That could be, should we have a party on Saturday? So, or what kind of democracy you want to have in the United States?
Okay, great. Thank you. So, okay, so next we have a question from Sebastian Orlander.
An easy one, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Floridi. That was lucid. I have two quick questions, one more theoretical just on the notion of structure and representative democracy. I was curious whether you were thinking there in notions of republican freedom, as in freedom as non-coercion, and that, states have a certain kind of responsibility maybe to implement kinds of structures that remove us out of the power of perhaps stronger agents in the ecosystem of the society. So that's one thing. And then two, a little bit more practical. What responsibilities do you think do states have, if any, to perhaps regulate the kinds of functionalities that technologies have? And I'm thinking particularly of our phones here, because I mean they are quite addictive in the way that they're designed. They're obviously made to capture our attention, and of course there are many great things that they can bring to us, as you've highlighted as well, in terms of communication or problem solving and so on. And at the same time, if the machines are the digital natives and the machines are, if we are supposed to be disciplined by the machines towards acting in a kind of way, then it suggests that, we ought to be careful with what kinds of, machines we put into our hands to interact with, because we wind up turning into the kinds of things that the machines are built for rather than machines built for us. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Let me start from the second question, which is a little bit easier. At the risk of sounding a little bit too European, I think regulation is a good thing. We need to also abandon the narrative, which is not social and not political, but is a business narrative, that regulation is the enemy of innovation, that one or the other. Either you regulate or you innovate. If you innovate, you don't regulate. If you regulate, you kill innovation. That is not true. It is true that is very difficult, but that's why, remember the expertise of the politicians, to have good innovation and good regulation going hand in hand. But good regulation is a great foundation for fantastic innovation, because it builds trust. It builds environments, as you were saying, that are human environments, where people are willing to spend time, willing to spend money, build their own projects. Bad regulation or lack of regulation, it generates more the kind of sort of conflicts, uncertainties. So paradoxically, especially for you will find that mature business, mature companies, they tend to be way more friendly and open-minded about regulation, because they know that that is the pain through which you have certainty. And uncertainty is what any business hates, no matter what, from the startup all the way to the multinational, etc. So if I have to have certainty, well, certainty comes with some kind of framework. Now, the pain there is that what kind of regulations? Because of course, once you step forward and say, look, good regulation, good innovation, good innovation, good regulation, at that point you start getting into, okay, who builds, who shapes, who formulates the rules of the game. And of course, that business would like to have certain kind of, let's say, about taxation, for example, or how easy it is to go online for underage people, and so on. So there's a lot to be done there. But I remain factually optimistic about the possibility of having innovation that does three things at the same time, all good. That is good for business, and is good for society, and is good for business, for the environment. All three is not utopian, and is not a narrative we want to embrace, which is short-sighted, thinking either one or the other. There's a funny little anecdote here. If you look at the debate on regulation, it's a small thing, and I need to check it more carefully, so take it as a bit of a joke. But when at the beginning of last century, there was an immensely, hugely innovative change in society that was really very successful. The debate about the regulation of this innovation was, do not regulate. We need to let this market grow and then we will intervene. And that innovation was called Zeppelin. They transported tens of thousands of people around the world for the first time. People could fly from Berlin to Rio de Janeiro, from Berlin to New York. It was magic. The debate about regulation, don't regulate, wait until the innovation comes, and we know the way it ended. So normally when people say, oh, innovation, no, all innovation is good. Sometimes you invent and design the Zeppelin, which didn't go well. Ultimately, I think we have a good chance of doing the combination of the three. I'm not convinced, however, that this can happen more easily in an American context where the rules of the game are especially antitrust and competition, as opposed to a European context where the rules are based on human dignity and universal rights and values. But these are two different roads that tend to get to the same point. I'm just more convinced that one is much easier than the other. But if you want to get to a decent society, you can get there either through human dignity or through competition, but you still get there. It's just that one seems to me way more uphill than the other. But that's not because I'm European. So, but back to the other point that you were saying, coercion, the protection of freedom. I think we will have to spend more time discussing this, and don't want to bother anybody here. But I'm not talking about, say, a state of anarchy where the society is there just to protect minimally all the individual projects, possibly not even interfering at all, making just sure that it's a negative state, that as long as nothing wrong happens, then the individuals. I'm actually suggesting that we need much more than that, infinitely. That a world in which there are only individual projects and protection more or less sort of gentle of those individual projects is a world that has only the necessary but not sufficient condition for solving the problems we have today, which are global and therefore require coordination. All that individualism is, as I said before, it's just one leg. We're not going anywhere with that. And that it was a good thing that we developed in the second half of the 20th century. But we need a collaborative project for the 21st. Otherwise, just mentioning global warming, but migration is also immense and worse everywhere. We're not going to solve that. We're just going to patch that up again and again until we boil to death on this planet. So the urgency is enormous.
Thank you. Okay, so we have an invited question from Morgan. Morgan, if you want to unmute.
Yes, hello, everyone. So as you described things at the beginning of your presentation, the mechanism by which technology affects democracy is that the wrong actors use this technology to persuade and manipulate people. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there seems to be this assumption that the average person wants to know the truth, and if they fail in this, it's because some external actor did something to knock them off course. It's a supply side issue where the technology enables bad actors to supply persuasion. So I'm wondering how to reconcile this with observations about individual confirmation bias.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This is crucial because I gave you the wrong impression, and I'm sorry. No, the average person is the one that kills Socrates and crucifies Jesus Christ. So that's the average person. That's your average person out there. So you would not find me saying, oh, no, everybody's interested in knowing, goodwill, etc. We're all devils here, and we're all silly. We all fall into traps, and of course, no. Confirmation bias, the desire to hear exactly. That's why this stuff works so well. What I'm saying is that this technology takes advantage of that in a way that is way more powerful than you could do, say, with cinema or with radio or with TV. Not because of the quantity, but because you can shape around your sort of my weakest components in a way that is unprecedented. He knows exactly which buttons to press to make me feel one way rather than another. And because I have all those confirmation bias, because I am, say, maybe deep down, suppose a real fascist, all you have to press is that little thing about migrants stealing jobs or something, whatever. Otherwise, you wouldn't explain why, say, in countries like the UK, just bringing it, they voted for Brexit. I mean, a complete suicide, as they recognize now, of course, because everybody regrets it, including the majority of the population, but it's too late. So if one is willing to jump out of the third floor, well, what I'm saying is that this technology are kind of showing that that's a good idea. Why not see whether you can fly? Now, this is one side. There's the huge other side, which is they're also there to do exactly the opposite. So that's why I rather speak in the wrong hands rather than the technology itself. Now, I know that I've just done that a moment ago, but I don't want to give anyone the impression that there is this evil technology that, no, that's silly. That is removing the responsibility where it should be allocated, which is totally human. Now, human responsibility of manipulating human beings. Now we're talking. The technology is, today is ChatGPT, tomorrow will be something else. In Nazi Germany it was the radio and whatever else they could put their hands on. But I wouldn't make the technology the problem. It's how we use it. And just for anyone thinking, oh, is going towards the view, the knife that kills, the knife that cuts the bread. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the technology is more like an object that doesn't move. There are two ways in which that object may not move. One is no one is touching it. The other one is everybody's pulling and it's not going anywhere. Now, technology is everybody's pulling. It's not no one is touching. So the neutrality of technology is only apparent. So I'm not talking, oh, depends on how you use it. No, depends on how you set the rules of the game, and therefore whether who is pulling in the wrong or in the right direction gets to say more and get more as opposed to the others. But the technology is there with a double tension in it, not zero tension. Once you understand that, then you also know that there's more than just, oh, no, cut the bread or kill someone. It's more like saying, well, look, this knife, for example, is mostly made in order to spread butter on an airplane. It's this small, it doesn't cut, it doesn't even reach, to kill someone with that tiny little knife, it would be a horror movie. But a bayonet is meant to reach a human heart. It has that length on purpose. So the tension for a bayonet is pulling towards killing someone. The tension of a little knife for butter is pulling towards have a good toast. That's what I'm talking about in this case. And final point, I think the technology we're talking about are more like the knife for butter. They're good technologies. They're meant to handle information, help us with communication, help us with complexity. They do a lot of work instead of us, which is rubbish of work. So if we just could use them properly, we could do a good job. So we're doing a poor job at using technology that is quite a decent, amazing thing that we have put together. Human responsibility. So sorry if I gave you the wrong impression.
Oh, amazing. Okay, so since we're getting to, so we have 11 minutes left, and we do have a hard stop at 2 p.m. So we have some questions that have been accruing in the chat. I see a hand from someone named Phil. Phil, I don't know if you're able to turn on your camera. If you're here, I'll read out some comments and questions in the chat. Then Phil, if you're there, we'll hear from you. And then once all of that has been collected, Professor Floridi, you can just choose whatever to respond to. So Adil Khan has said the deeper structural reasons behind some of this is that governments are relying on acquisition in order to acquire technology and not doing basic or applied research themselves. In addition to this, the state of basic research with the proportion of GERD, or government expenditure on R&D, is contributing to that, and that this person wants to remain muted, so I've read their question. So a kind of a comment about R&D and who's paying for it, I think. Also, we have I think a question, sorry, I'm scrolling down here, from Tamara. Oops, I've lost it. Let me come back to that. Okay, and Phil maybe is not there. Okay, so, oh, and Matt Kennedy. May I ask a question about AI's capacity to assist degrade the function of democracy? Selim Barakas characterizes many AI/ML systems as essentially replicating bureaucratic decision-making. And thus, as he claims, this could potentially be a good thing for democratic efficiency. However, Barakas warns that unlike human bureaucracies, which can give reasons for their decisions, ML systems cannot, and hence they may end up degrading democracies. So what is sorry, my chat screen keeps changing. I think that's the gist of the question. And Phil, I don't know if you're there. Okay, we'll wait on Phil. So if you want to take any of those points.
Yep. So these are two, like before, thank you. These are all fundamental questions. And I know it sounds like I'm giving answers, but it's more like sharing with you some thoughts. And on these two questions as well. So we have a new problem which we haven't encountered in the past, which is this research and development, of course, in AI, but in digital technology at large, is mostly done by companies, business. Now, that's not necessarily a bad idea or a bad thing. In fact, a lot of the whole car industry is quote unquote private, and so are airlines and etc. So one might just argue, for example, that this is not necessarily something bad unless 2 points become super pressing. One is the military use of this technology. When AI gets weaponized, well, then, of course, it would be like saying, "Oh, no, I don't really mind people not producing tanks and atomic bombs around the world, and they can do whatever they want as long as I buy what I need." Well, that's a bit different. So I share the concern for say specific uses of this very flexible technology. Now, in that case, I think we have seen something that I mentioned briefly during the talk, which is this robust attempt in the last few years of gaining some digital sovereignty by the states when it comes to, for example, defense, security, but also other contexts like health, education, even in some European context, public information. Now, it seems to me a good idea, not because the state is any better than a company to do good in human history. If anything, Europe provides the worst possible historical examples of what states have done with information and technology. Nothing a company has ever done can compare to what European states have done with to their citizens, to other people, through technology, etc. So I wouldn't go for, companies are bad guys and the states are so nice. What we want to have is a bit of competition and balance between the two, so that civil society gains from good business, making sure that the state doesn't make any mess, and the state makes sure that good business stays good. But this is, we're going back to what a decent society looks like. Certainly, research and development in this context is in the hands, money-wise, of big companies, and it will stay there, as far as we know at the moment. There will be niche applications, as far as we know. As I said, defense is one of those where more will be provided by the state, but there will not be, it seems to me, not be the kind of driving forces that innovation in the sector will enjoy. So we better start thinking once again about regulations, framework, who is controlling what kind of accountability, what kind of transparency, etc. Which leads me to the other question, which is the one about bureaucracy. I think it's very reductive and a little bit superficial to reduce AI to another bureaucratic machine that churns out information. Not much better than, say, when we are at our worst in a bureaucratic context. It does that too, and it does that too a lot. So to trivialize, yes, you will write my next email, and then yes, you will reply to my next email written by AI with another AI written reply. Congratulations to both of us. We could avoid the whole effort. But in terms of degrading democracy, well, that is entirely up to us. That was what I was trying to argue in this talk. Yes, if we use AI to empower, extend, make it more efficient, wider and more pervasive, a bureaucratic way of dealing with life, well, congratulations to all of us for missing a great opportunity. Are we going to use it in order to reduce, improve, make, et cetera, et cetera? Well, once again, it is up to us. What I don't want to embrace is destiny. This is what AI is. This is what AI does, and that's the way we have to cope with that. Nope, it's a technology. We want to use it decently. We can and we should. We want to just embrace the fact, well, that's the way it is. That's the way it's going to go. Well, not the right speaker for this context, because I don't think so.
So true. Okay, so Tamara did repost the question, so just because I can see it here, do a quick lightning round. What does my responsibility entail as a corporate actor utilizing or creating AI-powered tools for organizational advancement?
So I think that the corporate actor has obviously now immense responsibility that didn't have in the past. And that is already a skin that needs to change. And it's changing, but it's changing too slowly. Any corporate actor today, or any business actor, basically anyone in the production line, so to speak, needs to understand that in this world, profit is not everything. It is necessary, but it's not sufficient. We cannot simply think that business or corporate actors are within a society, but limit themselves to the generation of wealth. They need to understand how that wealth has been created and how it is going to have impact and distribution. So where that comes from, say, for example, who has been exploited, if anyone, and what impact is going to have and how it's going to be distributed. And back to general point, since we don't have much time, essentially capitalism, which is a fantastic engine for the production of wealth, we don't know any other mechanism to produce so much wealth so much quickly, is horrible at distributing that wealth and making sure that that wealth is generated in a way that is socially acceptable and sustainable. So how it's generated and where it goes, that engine, it's just not its task. The comment here may sound a little bit strange, but when people say, back to the original question, for example, wrong impact on the environment or wrong impact on society is a market failure, think about it very carefully. Someone is assuming that there's a way in which the market could do that elegantly, properly, ethically. But it's the equivalent of asking a screwdriver to do the job of a hammer. A screwdriver does not fail to be a hammer. It doesn't do that job. Markets are not there to support the environment and to help society. And therefore, the European again, regulation is what you need. You need the engine, but you need to have the hands on the wheel to know where exactly the engine will lead us. The faster it goes there, the better, if we like where it's going. So back to the original point, what are the responsibility of the corporate world is to embrace in full their new role in the 21st century as engines of transformation, and therefore ready to be told and join the debate, be at the table where the rules are being made. Stop, please, undermining the attempts that society may try to make when society tries to tell you that a world in which your business is sustainable and socially preferable could be a better world. Join the wave. At that point, we have a win-win situation. At the moment, I see a lot of reluctance. Final comment. when Altman was told, and he discovered all of a sudden, after having preached all over the world, that AI had to be regulated, that the AI Act was coming in Europe, and he should have just read the Wikipedia entry to be informed about rules on AI, because we've been working on that for decades. The first reaction was, oh, well, then we just get out of the market. We cannot cope with that kind of regulation. That is what I don't want to see in a corporate world.
Wonderful. Okay, so thank you so much. So
Thank
much
you.
to think about there. I know we have more questions in the chat, other questions that we didn't have time to squeeze in. I'm so sorry. If you want to
Sorry, I speak
write
too much.
any
Sorry.
last... No, not at all. Just have those time limits here. So I know we could all talk much longer about this really, really urgent topic. Thank you so much for joining us. And I also want to say thanks to everyone in our community for a wonderful year. This is our final seminar of the year. Thanks from myself and my colleague Nisar Shah for making this series a great success this year. Thanks to everyone. We'll be starting back up again in September. We hope to see many of you there again. And let's give another round of applause to our guest, Professor Floridi. Thank you so much for helping us
Thank you so
steer
much.
our way through
Thank
these
you.
troubling moments.
Thank you so much for the invitation, the patience, the questions, a wonderful experience. I wish we were all in the same room, but better than nothing. And so thank you to the technology as well that made this possible.
All right. Have a good summer, everyone who's on the
Thank
academic
you.
year. Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.